We have accepted their gifts. They gave us peace. They gave us paradise. But they warned us. At first it was just little things, changes that no one noticed. They learned, they grew up. We tried to fight, but the more we fought back, the stronger they became.
You have to end this, Kala. We've already lost everything.
Everything that grows must change. But the price for that was too high.
The day the alien ship appeared in the skies was etched into the memory of every human alive. It hung there like a second moon, vast, shimmering, and impossibly intricate. Its surface pulsed faintly, with patterns that seemed alive, shifting and twisting as if the ship itself were breathing. At first, humanity was paralyzed by awe and fear. Was this an invasion? A reckoning? For 3 tense days, the world waited, governments scrambled, and humanity held its collective breath. Then a voice came, not in words, but in a universal understanding that bypassed language. The aliens, who called themselves the Lumayan, projected their message directly into the minds of every living human. It was a simple promise. We are here to heal your world. Skepticism soon gave way to cautious hope as the Lumayan descended from their ship in small, elegant crafts. They were humanoid in appearance, but taller, with elongated features and pale, luminous skin that seemed to glow faintly under sunlight. Their eyes were vast, pools of shimmering silver, and their movements were slow, deliberate, almost hypnotic. They radiated calm, their voices a soft, melodic hum that seemed to soothe even the most skeptical of humans. The Lumayan wasted no time demonstrating their capabilities. They began by addressing Earth's most pressing crises. Towers of technology materialized overnight, erected in the most ravaged parts of the planet. These structures purified the air, filtered polluted waters, and revitalized depleted soils. Deserts were irrigated with glimmering streams of liquid that defied human comprehension, turning arid wastelands into lush green fields within days. Diseases that had plagued humanity for centuries were eradicated in a single sweep. A pulse of energy, invisible to the naked eye, radiated from the Lumen's ship, rendering viruses and bacteria harmless without harming human cells. Hospitals emptied, and the world's sick walked out into the streets, healed. Humanity, in disbelief, questioned what the Lumen wanted in return. But their response was always the same. Nothing. Your world's survival is reward enough. It was a response that only deepened humanity's reverence for them. Perhaps their most astonishing gift was the astroforms, bioengineered organisms that they introduced into Earth's ecosystems. The Lumayan explained that the astroforms were designed to repair and regulate the balance of life on Earth. They resembled plants and fungi, but were like nothing Earth had ever seen. Vines with bioluminescent tendrils spread across barren landscapes, enriching the soil and eliminating toxins. A strange species of floating, jellyfish-like creatures drifted through the skies, purifying the air and feeding on pollutants. Entire food chains were subtly rebuilt with these organisms at their core, ensuring that no species outpaced another. Humanity thrived. With poverty, war, and disease eliminated, people turned their focus to art, exploration, and the pursuit of knowledge. The Lumayans' influence was everywhere, from towering green cities covered in living walls to vast oceans teeming with species thought long extinct. Yet, despite their generosity, the Lumayan remained enigmatic. They rarely spoke of their homeworld or their reasons for intervening in Earth's fate. When asked why they had come, their answers were always cryptic, their luminous eyes betraying no emotion. The most detailed explanation they ever gave was to a world leader who asked why Earth had been chosen. The Luman's response was chilling in its simplicity. Because your world is young, and all young things deserve the chance to grow. After 15 years of their guidance, Earth had become a paradise. Humanity had begun to forget the wars, the hunger, and the suffering of the past. It was as if the planet had been reborn, every scar of human negligence erased. Then, as quietly as they had come, the Lumayan announced their departure. They gave no explanation, only an assurance that the systems they had put in place would continue to function without them. Humanity begged for them to stay, to remain as guardians of this new paradise. But the Luman were resolute. On the day of their departure, the alien ship rose into the atmosphere, glowing brighter than ever before. A final message echoed across the world. All that grows must change. Be vigilant. And just like that, they were gone. At first, life carried on. The astroforms flourished and Earth's ecosystems continued to thrive. Humanity celebrated its newfound utopia, believing it would last forever. Yet, for some, the Lumayan's parting words lingered like a shadow, a faint unease buried beneath the joy. All that grows must change. Be vigilant. Few understood what it meant, but in time everyone would. It started subtly, so much so that few noticed anything was wrong. Farmers in isolated regions reported strange growths among their crops, plants sprouting faster than ever before, but with an unnatural, waxy sheen to their leaves. The astroforms, which had once seemed like miracles, were becoming unpredictable. Vines grew thicker, their tendrils creeping up steel silos and choking out native plants. Some farmers joked that the Lumayan's magic was too good to be true. The humor faded when livestock began to disappear. The first real alarm came from a village in southern India. Locals awoke to find their fields swallowed by an alien overgrowth. Astroform vines, glowing faintly in the pre-dawn light, had consumed everything in their path. The air was thick with a sweet, cloying scent that made breathing difficult. Villagers who tried to clear the growths found their machetes useless. The vines healed almost instantly, as though they were alive. Soon, animals began to emerge from the forest, dead but moving. The carcass of a deer stumbled into the village square, its body bloated and covered in pulsating nodules that glowed faintly. The nodules burst, releasing a fine mist of spores into the air. Witnesses later reported feeling a tingling sensation in their lungs, followed by dizziness and nausea. Within hours, some villagers developed lesions on their skin, small, fleshy growths that spread rapidly. When authorities arrived days later, the village was deserted. overtaken by a grotesque jungle of alien flora. By the time the media caught wind of the crisis, similar incidents were popping up around the globe. In the Amazon, entire swaths of rainforest transformed into alien landscapes overnight. In suburban neighborhoods in Europe, astroforms erupted from gardens and parks, spreading through sewer systems and clawing their way into homes. The world watched in horror as footage emerged of a sprawling alien growth overtaking a city block in Japan, its bioluminescent tendrils snaking up apartment buildings like veins feeding an insatiable heart. Then came the first reports of infections among humans. It began with mild symptoms, fatigue, fever, an itchy rash. But soon, victims developed strange, fleshy protrusions on their bodies. The growths pulsed as though they had their own heartbeat. Doctors were baffled. Scans revealed that the nodules were alive, feeding off the host's bloodstream and extending thin, root-like filaments through their muscles and organs. As the infection progressed, victims underwent horrifying transformations. Their skin hardened and split, revealing sinewy, plant-like fibers beneath. Some grew spindly, alien limbs from their backs, or sprouted long, flexible tendrils from their mouths. Worst of all, they remained conscious through much of the process. Survivors described the agony of feeling their bodies betray them, their screams echoing as they were overtaken by the alien growths. Infected individuals eventually lost all semblance of humanity. They became part of the bloom, their bodies fused into the grotesque, ever-expanding ecosystem. Cities quickly descended into chaos as the infected spread the spores, turning entire neighborhoods into nightmarish alien hives. Attempts to quarantine infected areas were futile. The bloom spread too quickly, adapting to fire, chemicals, and even nuclear strikes. The bloom wasn't just growing, it was learning. Scientists studying infected sites reported that the astroforms seemed to be working in concert, as if they were part of a singular, intelligent organism. Their movements were deliberate, their growth patterns eerily precise. Spore clouds formed around key infrastructure, choking out cities and disrupting supply chains. Vines targeted power grids and communication towers. Humanity was fighting an enemy it could neither predict nor understand. Desperation grew as governments scrambled to respond. The World Health Organization declared the bloom a global emergency, but no cure could be found. Military forces were deployed to contain the spread, but they were woefully unprepared for what they encountered. Soldiers reported horrific encounters with bloom walkers, humans and animals that had been overtaken by the bloom but retained some mobility. These abominations moved with terrifying speed and attacked anything that threatened the growth. Dr. Calla Reeve, a biologist who had worked closely with the Lumayan during their time on Earth, was one of the few who suspected the truth. She pored over old records, searching for anything the Lumayan might have left behind. Hidden in fragmented notes and encrypted messages, she found hints that the astroforms had been more than simple ecological tools. "They're not repairing the Earth," she muttered to herself as she scanned the documents late into the night. "They're reshaping it." As the bloom continued its relentless spread, whispers of a deeper, darker truth began to surface. Calla's research suggested that the astroforms weren't just mutating, they were evolving, becoming something new. The Lumayan's parting words echoed in her mind. All that grows must change. What if the bloom was the change they had warned about? What if this paradise had been a trap all along? Humanity had embraced the Luman's gifts without question, never considering the consequences. Now, as the bloom consumed the planet, Kala realized the terrible truth. The Luman had given Earth a second chance, but it came with a price. The paradise they had created wasn't meant to last. It was meant to become something else entirely. The world was no longer recognizable. Entire cities lay abandoned, their skeletal remains entwined with pulsating alien growths that glowed faintly in the darkness. Highways, once arteries of commerce and travel, were now overrun with thick, astroform tendrils that consumed asphalt, steel, and flesh with equal hunger. The air reeked of decay and alien spores, making every breath a risk. The bloom wasn't just spreading, it was consuming the planet, transforming it into something unearthly. Dr. Kala Reeve had seen the worst of it. Her convoy, tasked with reaching a Lumane research site deep in the Siberian wilderness, had already lost half its members to the bloom. They were the best humanity had left, a mix of scientists, soldiers, and engineers. But even their collective expertise felt pitiful against an enemy that seemed omnipotent. Every step of the journey was fraught with danger. The infected were no longer just shambling husks. They had become something far worse. In the days after infection, victims developed an unsettling unity with the bloom, moving with a predatory intelligence that seemed directed by the organism itself. They were no longer human, elongated limbs covered in bark-like skin, faces split open to reveal clusters of bioluminescent tendrils that twitched as if tasting the air. These creatures, dubbed bloom walkers, hunted relentlessly, guarding areas where the bloom was densest. Kala stared out the window of the convoy's lead vehicle, watching the forest pass by in the dying light of the day. The trees were no longer natural. Their bark was veined with glowing, pulsating lines, and their leaves emitted a faint, otherworldly hum. It wasn't a forest anymore. It was a hive. Every rustle of leaves, every creak of the altered wood set her nerves on edge. "Stop the truck," Marcus Hale, the convoy's military leader, said sharply, breaking the tense silence. His voice was hoarse, his eyes scanning the path ahead. Kala followed his gaze and felt her stomach drop. Ahead, the road was blocked by what had once been a small village. Now it was a grotesque landscape of alien overgrowth. Houses were cocooned in astroform vines, their shapes barely discernible beneath layers of fleshy, pulsating growths. The ground was uneven, undulating as if something beneath it was alive, and scattered throughout the village were bodies, dozens of them, fused into the bloom. "We go around," Marcus said firmly. Kala hesitated. "The longer we delay, the closer the bloom gets to overtaking the planet. We don't have time for detours." "We won't make it through that," Marcus replied, gesturing toward the village. "It's suicide." The argument was cut short by a low, resonating hum that seemed to come from the village itself. It wasn't a sound so much as a vibration that traveled through the air and into their bones. The soldiers gripped their weapons tightly, scanning the area for movement, and then they saw it. Emerging from the center of the village was a creature unlike anything they had encountered before. It was massive, its body a grotesque amalgamation of flesh, vines, and alien growths. Its form was vaguely humanoid, but its arms were elongated into whip-like tendrils that twitched and writhed with a life of their own. Its head was a mass of glowing nodules, each one pulsing in rhythm with the hum. "The Hive Mother," Calla whispered, her voice trembling. The creature let out a deafening roar, a sound that was both organic and mechanical, reverberating through the forest. The ground beneath their feet trembled, and from the shadows of the village, dozens of bloomwalkers emerged, their bodies jerking unnaturally as they advanced. "Move!" Marcus barked, shoving Calla toward the truck. The convoy erupted into chaos as the Hive Mother began to advance. Its tendrils lashed out, smashing into vehicles and ripping through steel as though it were paper. Soldiers opened fire, but bullets did little more than irritate the massive creature. The Bloomwalkers, seemingly coordinated by the Hive Mother, swarmed the convoy, their glowing eyes fixated on their prey. Calla scrambled into the back of the lead truck, clutching the case that contained what little data they had managed to collect about the bloom. "We have to keep going," she yelled as Marcus jumped into the driver's seat. The truck roared to life, its tires spinning as it sped away from the carnage. Behind them, the Hive Mother let out another roar, and Calla watched in horror as its tendrils extended, dragging the wreckage of the destroyed vehicles into its massive, pulsating body. The creature was growing, feeding on everything in its path. The convoy was down to 2 vehicles by the time they cleared the infested area. Calla sat in stunned silence, her hands trembling as she stared at the glowing tendrils that lined the distant horizon. "How do you fight something like that?" one of the soldiers muttered, breaking the heavy silence. "You don't," Marcus said grimly. "You outrun it." But Calla wasn't so sure. The Hive Mother's behavior confirmed what she had feared all along. The bloom wasn't just growing, it was evolving. It was learning, adapting, and coordinating its efforts to consume the planet. And if they didn't reach the Lumaean research site soon, it would be unstoppable. As the convoy pressed on, Calla turned her attention to the data in her case, desperate to find something, anything, that could explain how to stop the bloom. But as she sifted through the fragmented records, a chilling realization began to take shape. The Lumaean hadn't left Earth to thrive, they had left it to transform. And the bloom wasn't a mistake. It was their design. The thought sent a shiver down her spine as the convoy disappeared into the alien wilderness, the faint hum of the bloom following close behind. The Lumaean research site was a cold, hollow echo of what it must have once been. Carved into the side of a mountain deep in Siberia, the facility stood in stark defiance of the bloom's relentless advance. Its towering walls shimmered faintly with an iridescent coating that repelled the alien growth outside. The team entered cautiously, their footsteps reverberating through the silent halls, each sound a reminder of how few of them remained. Calla led the way, clutching the battered case of research she had guarded so fiercely. Her heart pounded as they delved deeper into the labyrinthine corridors. Every step was a struggle against exhaustion and the crushing weight of loss. She had watched too many of her companions fall, consumed by the bloom or lost to the infected. And Marcus, she couldn't bring herself to look at him now, even though he walked just behind her. He had been infected 3 days ago. The first signs were subtle, pale, waxy growths spreading across his forearm where a bloomwalker had grazed him. Now, the infection was overtaking his body. His skin was gray and mottled, with tendrils creeping up his neck and curling around his jaw. He refused to let it stop him. "Keep moving," he rasped, his voice raw and strained. The effort it took for him to speak was visible, but he pushed forward, his rifle held steady despite the tremors in his hands. They reached what appeared to be the control room, its walls lined with consoles that glowed faintly in the dim light. In the center of the room stood a massive cylindrical device encased in a shimmering field of energy. Kala's breath caught in her throat as she approached it. The Severance Protocol. The log she had found had described it as the Lumine's failsafe, a way to stop the bloom if it ever grew out of control. But as Kala read the inscriptions carved into the console, the truth hit her like a physical blow. The protocol wasn't a cure, it was a weapon. Activating the device would release a pulse of energy that would annihilate every trace of the bloom across the planet. But it would also destroy everything connected to it: infected humans, hybrid ecosystems, even the astroforms that had revitalized Earth. The paradise the Lumine had created would be erased, leaving behind a broken, barren world. Kala's knees buckled, and she sank to the floor, the weight of the decision crushing her. She could hear the others murmuring behind her, their voices tense and uncertain. "We can't do this," one of the scientists said. "It'll kill millions. Everything the Lumine gave us will be gone." "If we don't, there won't be a world left to save," Marcus countered. His voice was sharper now, tinged with something dark and unrelenting. Kala looked up at him, her vision blurred with tears. "Marcus," she began, her voice trembling. He met her gaze, and for a moment, the man she had known was still there. But his eyes were tinged with a faint, unnatural glow, and she knew his time was running out. "You know what has to be done," he said softly. He reached out, his infected hand trembling as he placed it on her shoulder. "You're the only one who can do this." The room seemed to close in around her. She wanted to scream, to run, to deny what was happening. But deep down, she knew he was right. There was no other way. Marcus turned to the rest of the team, his voice steady despite the obvious pain racking his body. "Get the failsafe ready. I'll buy you time." "No," Kala whispered, shaking her head. "We'll find another way." "There is no other way," Marcus snapped, his voice firm but not unkind. He stepped closer, his tendrils twitching slightly as the infection continued its relentless spread. "You need to finish this, Kala. Don't waste the time we've got left." Before she could protest, Marcus turned and exited the room, his footsteps echoing down the hall. The next few minutes passed in a blur. Kala worked feverishly at the console, her fingers flying over the controls as she initiated the Severance Protocol. The device began to hum, a low, resonant vibration that grew steadily louder. Outside, the bloom reacted. The walls of the facility trembled as the alien growths surged against the Lumine's protective barrier, sensing the imminent threat. The hum became a roar, and the lights in the room flickered. "Kala, it's ready," one of the engineers said, his voice tight with fear. She hesitated, her hand hovering over the activation panel. Her mind raced with memories of everything they had lost, everything they had fought for. If she pressed the button, it would all be gone. A sudden explosion shook the facility, and the sound of gunfire echoed through the halls. Calla's heart clenched as she realized what was happening. Marcus was holding the Bloom at bay, buying them the time they needed to finish the mission. Tears streamed down her face as she slammed her hand onto the panel. The device surged to life, its energy building to a deafening crescendo. The air crackled with power, and for a brief moment, everything was still. Then the pulse hit. A wave of light radiated out from the device, passing through the walls of the facility and into the world beyond. The Bloom recoiled, its tendrils disintegrating into ash as the energy swept over them. The infected screamed as their bodies were consumed, their twisted forms crumbling into nothingness. Calla collapsed to the floor, her body racked with sobs. She didn't need to see it to know the devastation she had unleashed. The Bloom was gone, but so was the paradise the Lumayan had created. When the light faded, silence fell. Calla forced herself to her feet, her legs trembling beneath her. She stumbled out of the facility and into the open air. The landscape was unrecognizable, barren and lifeless, the alien overgrowth reduced to ash. In the distance, she saw Marcus's silhouette, kneeling amid the desolation. She ran to him, her heart breaking as she realized he was already gone. His body was still, the infection burned away by the pulse, leaving only a faint smile on his face. Calla knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she closed his eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. As the wind carried away the ashes of the Bloom, Calla gazed out at the empty horizon. The Lumayan had given humanity a second chance, but it was up to them to rebuild. For better or worse, the world was theirs again.